Today on the show, our guest is tax attorney Hubert Johnson from Guardian Tax Law in Tucson, Arizona. Let me tell you more about Hubert. Now, Hubert Johnson has over 14 years of experience as a tax attorney. And in that time, Mr. Johnson taught graduate tax law at Baruch College, lectured to tax professionals in seminars and training across the country, and has co-written 2 books on tax debt resolution. Mr. Johnson launched Guardian Tax Law, PLLC, in November of 2019 and has assisted thousands of individuals and businesses in dealing with IRS and state tax issues. Hubert has 5 children. He's married to Katie Johnson. His passion is coaching and officiating youth sports, mostly basketball and soccer, volunteering in his community and for his church. He loves history, sarcasm, and helping people pay as little as possible in taxes. Please visit his firm's website, which is guardiantaxlaw.com. We will have a link to that in the show notes. We're going to talk about specifically why you're going to want to reach out to Hubert for either yourself or your clients. Also, follow his YouTube channel, which is at Guardian Tax Law on YouTube. Just search for Guardian Tax Law. We will also have a link to that in the show notes because they have some great content out there to learn. Hubert, welcome to Keeping It Real.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to. This is a bit of a departure for us. I spend most of my time talking to top realtors, and I love when we have a guest opportunity that is a little bit outside of what we normally do, because I think this could really provide some excellent value to our listeners. But I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. We know you're a tax attorney. So how did you sort of get into tax law? Was that something that you knew from day one of law school that you wanted to get into, or how did you get there?
I actually hated tax law in law school. I took a federal income tax, and I ended up teaching it later. That's what I ended up teaching, but I didn't like it. And so it's one of those things. I graduated, took the bar, and my wife ended up in the hospital for 5 months. Life just went upside down on me. And so I needed a job, and I ended up applying for and working at a tax law firm. And when I first went in, I did the interview, and I was talking to my brother afterwards, and he was asking me about it. And I said, well, I'm just helping people that haven't paid on taxes, et cetera. And he said, hold the phone. Helping people to pay less in taxes is one of the most patriotic things you can do. And I fell in love with it, and I've done it ever since.
You know, I do like that, and I've always loved the expression, whatever side of the political spectrum that you fall on. We are, sort of, we don't have a political slant on the show. Certainly, our guests can, but we are agnostic, I guess, for politics. But I've always loved the expression: nobody pays $1 more in taxes than they want to, or that they ought to, right? So nobody does that, regardless of whether you're the wealthiest American or not. I think there is something to be said that we all could, we want to use the tax laws at our disposal to really make sure that we're minimizing our tax exposure.
And it's across the spectrum. It's all Americans that are impacted by the IRS. I don't help people avoid taxes or hide taxes, because then you get to go to a criminal tax attorney, which isn't me, and you do not want to go there. But again, helping people wherever they are realize and know what their rights and options are is really important. And my office manager makes fun of me. She says I always make people cry. But it's from unburdening this huge burden that affects people dealing with taxes.
And we should also mention, I mentioned Hubert has taught at Baruch College in New York. I didn't mention New York, but for those of you that aren't from the East Coast, maybe aren't familiar with that university, that is a very, very excellent and top tier university. So this is a very, very smart and competent man, and I'm excited that you're here. Before we get into some of your actual specialties around tax liens and what you wish realtors knew about, the roadblocks or getting over some of those roadblocks they may run into with client situations, can we just talk for a moment about how about a realtor's own specific tax situation, specifically around how they're compensated? And I know this isn't exactly what you do, but can we just make a plea for our listeners to consider incorporating and actually exploring being paid as a business owner versus just as an independent contractor?
Sure. And this is pretty much falls into, how do I not become or need Guardian Tax Law? So if you follow this advice, you won't be in trouble with the IRS. And again, I love giving free advice out that helps people avoid these tax issues in the first place because it is amazingly stressful. Issue number one, incorporate, get a business structure, some kind of formation. And the main reason for this is it protects your personal assets from any IRS debt. Believe it or not, when you have a corporation and if you incur liabilities under it and you close it out, almost all of the tax debt under that corporation goes away with that corporation. That doesn't mean you can open up one EIN after another and just try to avoid it. But if something happens, the economy goes bad, you have to close a business down and then reorganize in a different form. You can do that. And we close out business debt all the time. And it separates the business tax issues from your personal issues.
I have a great story, or sorry, not maybe it's not a great. It's actually kind of a sad story, but it's a story that illustrates this. Just yesterday, I was with somebody that had owned a very successful brokerage, real estate brokerage here in town. He sold it, and the building that he had purchased 20 years ago. Well, this is more of a Chicago thing, but the taxes for the property taxes for that particular property went from, this is not an exaggeration, from 30,000 a year to 106,000 a year in 1 year. Now, so basically, 300% or whatever percentage that would be, and he'd already appealed it. It was supposed to be 140,000. He got it down to 106. So anyway, he was in a scenario now where, to your point, he's like, I can't. He goes, I'm just going to give the keys to the bank at this point because I can't obviously afford to continue that. And because it's in an LLC or however he has it structured, we're talking about the same sort of situation. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's not just tax debt like you mentioned.
Yeah. So yeah, so if and by the way, this isn't really what Hubert's firm does, but if you would like to incorporate, if you are, I say for sure, if you're a full-time practicing realtor, you really probably ought to. It sort of depends on income level, and your CPA should be able to determine when that makes sense for you. But Hubert also knows a lot of CPAs across the country. Not only does he know them, he knows the good ones. And I love my CPA. Do I know for sure that she's one of the good ones? I don't know. I haven't gone to jail, so I'm hoping. But the truth is, I really don't know. I mean, I love her, and I'm probably never going to leave her unless she screws up badly. And I do really like her. But the truth is, I found her on my own, and I think it's a better way to go is to go through somebody like Hubert who knows who at least some of the good players out there. So reach out to him if you are interested in considering that, because if you're being paid just as an independent contractor, there's a very good chance, again, depending on how much commission you're earning a year, that you could actually save in basically how it could work. The way that I have it structured for me is I am an employee of my own company. Well, I'm not a realtor in the traditional sense, but if I were, those commissions would be paid to my business, and then I take a salary, and I have an S corporation, and the government or the feds are actually quite lenient about what I have to pay myself based on the overall income. Anyway, so talk to a CPA. If you don't have a good one, reach out to Hubert. He'll connect you with somebody. But let's talk about your specialty now, Hubert. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us all about tax liens and what realtors need to know.
Well, just real quick on that, estimated tax payments, if you work for yourself, et cetera, business write-offs, a good CPA will save you a ton of money. If you're using TurboTax, H&R Block, sorry, not to knock them, but there are plenty of CPAs that are cheaper than those companies and will do a much better job. As far as my specialty, we work directly with the IRS. We're on the phone with the IRS and state taxing agencies every day. And one of the big reasons we work with and love realtors so much is that we can help people buy and sell property. And so we have realtors that send people to us saying, look, this guy owes so much. We will set it up in a installment agreement. And to help people buy, once you get an installment agreement, they still need to qualify based on income to debt ratio. But once that establishment is set up, there are mortgage companies that will still finance a mortgage as long as it's in an installment agreement status. Once that's done, they can purchase the home, and then we can go back and renegotiate with the IRS. It doesn't mean they're stuck making that payment. So there's plenty of time that we get them into a home, and then we change gears and do something better for them. We might wipe out the debt. We might do something else. but getting someone into a home makes a huge difference for people, and it is so important.
So let's start with the beginning. So a realtor has a client. Who would be a perfect client for somebody for your firm?
So a perfect client is someone that knows they have a tax issue and is willing to deal with it. And so they usually run into those issues when they go to refinance, when they
Mhm.
go to purchase a property and someone tells them, oh, you have a tax issue. You need to deal with it before you can do A, B, or C.
Got it.
So they come in, they want to get this addressed, they want to move forward, purchase a home, move forward, improve their lives through working with realtors and purchasing real property. And those are great clients because they're ready to take care of the issue.
And I remember, let's say 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, there was a boon um, in the, what would they call it? The, not tax reduction business, but the debt consolidation business, and that I see you smiling because that was a very interesting business where there were a lot of non professionals playing in that space. Can you speak a little bit to that? Just because I know I heard a lot about that even just on news and radio and all of that, and how this is different from that.
So debt consolidation really is people giving good financial advice, helping people pay down their tax debt. You can get a lot of the same information from Dave Ramsey or other financial professionals online. They're not using any special licenses or skills to negotiate with the IRS. You have to be licensed with the IRS. You have to, and having that experience to go in and do what's called an offer and compromise, a settlement, takes years of experience. I've had over 300 accepted offers in 1 year alone, me personally. And you'll just see, I think it was about a month ago, we settled $249,000 for 20 bucks. And we do
Wow.
that on a regular basis. We go as low as $20. And if the shoe fits, if you qualify, it's an amazing service. And we get 1 to 2 of those accepted every week.
Unbelievable. This is yeah. So for those of you that are just going to, a standard debt consolidation company, this is not really that's not really what they do. They may call your a credit card company and try to negotiate for you or something of that nature, but they're not going to have the licenses that are necessary to actually communicate with the IRS, with the feds, and actually get something done. And yeah, so that's a fantastic suggestion. What else should realtors really understand about sort of the tax liens and how you guys can fit in?
So we can help people sell property. And that's the other half of it is when they have a tax lien on their property and they want to sell, they can get rid of it. I had someone who, interesting story, he was a third owner in a property. We went and dug into the tax liens. He knew he owed the IRS, but he didn't know how old the debt was. IRS tax debt goes away after approximately 10 years. So we found out exactly when he needed to sell. We pursued it and made sure that the debt fell off. He sold it. He was able to walk away with that money.
Wow.
Simple
That's
case there.
that's incredible. Let's talk about property seizure because we know that that's also an important topic that happens. Realtors run into that all the time. Let's talk about how to avoid that and maybe how a realtor could at least begin to have a conversation with a client in that situation.
So property seizures is something that I've never had an active client had their property seized because you have to do a lot of things wrong to have property seized. I have had I've stepped into cases where the other attorneys have done everything wrong, where they ended up going to tax court and losing. One guy charged him $25,000 to go to tax court and filed in the wrong venue or place, and
Oof.
still charged him the 25,000. No, it's
Oh
horrible,
boy.
absolutely
That's
horrible.
no, I'm just laughing because of the absurdity of that. Yes, that's
Yeah, no,
awful.
but they had their case was already before the Department of Justice. So here I
Mm.
am dealing with this in federal court to give you an idea of where I am. And the sale went through because they owed it was over $1 million home and they had a second home too. So it wasn't a very sympathetic situation. But I've stopped home sales that were with the DOJ as well. You don't want to be before the DOJ. You don't want to go to tax court in 99% of cases. You want someone that will attack the debt, get rid of it, and preserve your assets and your property. There are ways to do that without making it a $25,000, $50,000 case. Usually you can deal directly with the IRS or state and address those issues. So if someone's telling you, hey, we need you to go to tax court, pay me 25 grand for it, get a second opinion. A lot of times, if you do owe, even if you have asset equity and assets, you can settle, or you can set up some kind of arrangement and just let that clock run. Or if the tax lien shouldn't be there in the first place. So we've gone in and released tax liens. One case where a gentleman, he partnered up with someone who was an ex-con, didn't know it, and he embezzled money. He put his name on property he shouldn't have had. You're shaking your head. So again, it was a giant mess, and we went through and fixed it all up with the tax lien department. And one nice thing about the IRS, it's not known for its efficiency. That's sarcasm.
No, I'm laughing because thankfully I haven't had any IRS issues, but I did actually, just at a funny sidebar. I got a phone call years ago from the IRS, and it was a gentleman. He said, "Oh, I need to." There was this one form for my business that I didn't send in. And I'd always heard the IRS will never call you. So if someone's calling you, it's not the IRS. And I went, well, he sounds like the IRS. He's just asking for this one form that I don't know why a scammer would want that. And sure enough, no, he really was with the IRS, and he really did need this one particular form. And I faxed it over to him, and he was actually here locally in Chicago. So, but most of the time, the IRS I don't think calls, but they do call once in a while, or at least they called me and we got it resolved, and it wasn't a big deal. But you're right. The efficiency of it, I think they were 5 years late. I didn't even know I owed this particular document, and they called me 5 years after the fact. And that's why I got really nervous, because I thought, well, this doesn't sound right. The guy goes, everybody thinks I'm not who I am. You can look me up. I'm really the guy. I work down at the building, Fed building downtown. It was really more funny than anything. But for the first 5 times he called me, I just deleted the voicemail. I'm like, this is obviously a scam. And no, it was actually real. Great point. So if somebody is worried about property seizure, that's when they should reach out to you and just sort of see what the options are. Is that fair?
Well, call us right away, because most situations can be saved and fixed. But what I was going to say is about the efficiency. If you need to sell a property, the IRS actually will jump on it because they're getting money from the sale of the property.
Sure.
So within 30 days, we can help with the sale of property, getting a payoff letter from the IRS, or lien subordination or subrogation. That's, fancy terms for it. But allow for the sale of property, even if the IRS isn't going to get any money. So there is a tax lien department that is the most responsive department at the IRS, and you can jump on these cases and get it resolved. But as far as seizure, usually, like, everything's going the wrong way. We've saved homes, we've saved properties for people heading in that direction. But again, they're doing everything wrong. They've got bad advice, or they don't know what to do. And I have a client that I actually had to fire recently, about a year ago, because they were doing everything wrong. They had a rental property that, one, they didn't tell me about. Don't tell your attorney they're there to represent you. You have attorney-client privilege. You can tell them pretty much everything about where your bodies are buried. But so they didn't tell us about that. They tried to hide it from the IRS. The IRS found it because they see most things. They tried to put it in a trust after they knew about the debt, which is a problem. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. The trust wasn't valid anyway. And then they blew off the IRS. Ironically, we got $400,000 that went away and expired in their case, and they owed about $800,000. Wow. But they still had this property that didn't want to disclose. So the IRS went and nailed the notice on the door and started taking all of their renters' payments. So they were moving to seize the property. They sent them notices to appear for summons. So they were being summoned. And if you don't appear to those, you can have a warrant issued for your arrest. Mm-hmm. So again, doing everything the wrong way. And eventually we terminated with them and said, look, you're not listening to us, and you're going to end up in a criminal case. And so this is the strongest way we can warn you. But listen to your attorney, listen to a good attorney. If you're not sure, get a second opinion. But you can save most properties. I've had people call me when the IRS is coming in to seize accounts, seize property, and be able to stop it, as long as it's not too late. If it's too late, you might have to contact a bankruptcy attorney, which, again, they're worse than we are.
um, so I'm curious for the majority of your clients who are dealing with a real estate sort of tax situation or tax lien rather on real estate. Is it more often investors who these are investment assets, or are they more primary residences? Just out of curiosity.
There's some investment property, but it usually not an investment group. So it's usually an individual that has different properties that they've invested in, rentals. We do a lot where we protect primary residences. The interesting thing about rentals, if you're using it to produce income, you can protect that from the IRS and even do an offer in compromise and wipe out debts if it's producing income for you. It's seen as a mini business. So having rental property that's actively being used can really help serve you, and we can protect that for you.
Yeah, it's a really important point. If it's making money, there's that's a good thing, and of course, that's what investors are looking for, is that positive cash flow. Um, Also, I want to talk about property protection. Like, when will the IRS? I know, like, come after a property that's encumbered or in a business. And how can what do agents need to know about that?
So I've never had someone come to me where I helped them, they listen to me, and they actually had property seized. The main reason is if you do it right, you produce the documents, you work with the IRS. Again, they'll give you bad information. It's always fun dealing with them. But when I step into a case, I've had plenty of times they told me, "Look, why are you even here? This or that." A month or two later, they're singing a completely different tune. Oh my gosh, you're making my job easy. It's like, yeah, because I don't want you looking too closely at my client.
Right.
So we work with them for the benefit of our clients, wrap up the case. That's the main thing. You have to work with the IRS. Putting your head in the sand is not a good strategy, and that's the worst case scenario. I've had too many people hire me or others and then ignore them, and things don't go well because the IRS just they'll ratchet up the pressure until it's seizure time. And if it comes to seizure, you've gotten a lot of bad advice. Call us, we can jump into it and usually stop it. But have a little horror story if you want to hear it.
Love to.
So this isn't real property, but someone that owned a car lot. We came to us and we were going to charge him 7 grand on the spot to start. And I called the IRS, spoke to the revenue officer, and he told me there's nothing you can do to save this client. They have been trying to get the seizure paperwork processed, and they have to send it to their attorneys. And you almost never deal with IRS attorneys. And he had been waiting months for it. And he told me as soon as that comes back, it could be Monday, it could be a month from now, I'm going in with a fleet of tow trucks and I'm going to cut open the gates and just haul all of those cars off of his lot. And I said, well, that's lovely. What do I say? I'm like, okay, well, thanks for being straight with me. I called the client
Yeah.
up and said, don't hire us. You need to hire a business bankruptcy attorney right away to save your property. And I asked him, are those cars even yours? He said, no, they're on consignment.
Oh.
Did you give that information to the IRS? He said, well, he asked for it, but I haven't gotten around to it. So he called the business bankruptcy attorney, called me back and said, he wants $20,000. I said, pay the man. Don't wait. Don't blow off the IRS. It's always better to deal with it and get good advice and deal with it head on.
Yeah, it does seem to happen to some mechanics, or I've heard of this happening. Very, it's not that uncommon where the business goes bankrupt. The cars they were working on, or the cars that are on consignment at the time, uh, get all wrapped into the debt, and it's my brother-in-law lost a car that way. Anyway, so yeah, it's yeah, that makes perfect sense that. That you'd want to step in pretty seriously at that point and make sure that it doesn't all go to pot.
I do have a
So
success story.
let's hear it.
So this is dealing with real estate. This gal actually got prosecuted for fraud. So pretty serious case, got prosecuted by the DOJ, owed was close to $1 million, and had quite a few rental properties in Chicago. So we try to come in and look at it in a holistic manner. She didn't know what was going on with the rentals, which ones were profitable, which ones weren't. We laid that all out for her, got a bookkeeper, got a CPA, and we were able to look at, and we actually sold off some of the properties that weren't profitable. consolidated her holdings so she was making money off of it, got rid of other debt that was just killing her and not helping her. And she was able to turn around and set up an installment agreement and to deal with this and stop all the collections, stop all the seizures, and came out of it with all the property she still wanted intact.
Wow. And so when you work with somebody who has $1 million situation like that, and obviously every situation is unique, but what could that be whittled down to when you're dealing with the IRS? Could it be whittled down to zero, or is it typically a percentage of it? That how does the IRS typically look at those kind of things?
So you're talking about the offer and compromise. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
Cinderella's shoe. If your financial situation fits what they're looking for, it's an amazing offer. We do it all the time. But if your situation doesn't match, so again, I have an actor, and he's making a couple million a year, and he owes a couple million in taxes. He's paying it down. He'll pay it all off eventually, but he doesn't qualify for an offer and compromise. He just makes too much money.
Yeah.
That other gal that I was talking about, she had assets, she had rentals, and she was making well over $100,000 a year at her normal job. She just made too much money, didn't qualify. On the other hand, I just brought someone in. He has a lot of bills, but he's making 17 grand a month. And he might not qualify for an offer, but we're going to put him in a hardship status where he doesn't have to pay anything to the IRS for at least a couple of years. And we'll reevaluate his situation once it becomes a little more established and consider those other options. So if you're making, even if you're making 10 to 15,000, it's not automatic that you're not going to qualify. Get a thorough review. I've had people, one gentleman had a house, and this is an interesting real estate story. He had been told by a couple other tax attorneys that he didn't qualify for an offer and compromise, couldn't do it. And then he even went on the IRS website, plugged in his numbers. They told him no. He was referred to me by his parents and said, you need to call this guy. He called me up. We went through his numbers, and by the numbers, he didn't qualify. But I said, hey, let's make a couple adjustments. He had a 401k with about 40,000 in it. He owed $80,000. I said, well, tell me about your house. And it was valued by Zillow. We know Zillow's valuations are accurate.
So usually not, but sometimes.
Usually not.
I'm friendly with Zillow, so I'm trying to toe the line there. But the listeners know what they think about Zillow.
Well, he went and got his own evaluation or appraisal of the property, but this house was built in the 1880s or 90s. Oh. Last updated in World War II. He was there living with a couple kids, married with a couple kids. It had lead piping through the house. Oh boy. The roof leaked. I mean, it was needed so much work to it. And I told him, look, take the 401k, do necessary repairs to your home so you don't have lead piping in your house. At least fix up the kitchen, the bathroom, basic stuff. And I said, talk to your wife, see what she thinks. She loved the idea. And because we redid the evaluation, we took the 401k, did necessary repairs, which is allowable by the IRS. We were able to settle that for, I think it was between $6,000 and $7,000, wiped out the $80,000. And he got to keep his house.
Now, when somebody goes through that particular situation, just out of curiosity, how does that typically affect credit score, or does it not? How does that, with the IRS, is working on, an agreement that you guys come to settle on? How does that affect things like FICO? And
it greatly improves it because it shows that this debt has now been settled.
Got it.
And it doesn't report it anymore as a negative debt that's not being paid. Installment agreements, again, you still have this tax debt, but it shows that you're making regular payments on it. So going in and setting up some kind of resolution not only helps your credit, but it also stops the IRS from coming after you, because that's the worst thing. I get the calls, people, my bank accounts got cleared out. I just got hit by a tax lien I didn't even know about. That's typically what we see is people come to us when the house is on fire. We love it when people come to us with questions. Hey, I might have this issue. Or I think I owe, but they haven't come after me yet. Great, we can set it up for you so they don't have to worry about the world crashing down as we deal with this. We can prevent all of that as we go through most cases.
Wow. And we should also mention, too, another reason to consider anyone who's having a tax situation over to Hubert's firm is that a lot of times with some of the creative strategies they have to, work with the IRS, there is sales of property that happen.
Mhm.
Certain properties get sold. So Hubert has to refer business out to realtors from really all over the country because his clients are kind of from everywhere. So can we talk a little bit about how a realtor could connect with you in the event where they have this situation? What would be for one of their clients? What's the best way they should reach out?
Well, call our main line at it's 520-485-7371. You can contact us through our website. But the best thing is just call. We do a free consultation. So I'm a little old school. I feel people should actually have information before they start paying for services, et cetera. And especially with taxes, people want to know how much is this going to cost me compared to how much I owe. And so we do a free consultation for people, put their mind at ease. And we, like you said, I call people and I use different networking resources to refer business out across the country. And I would love to have realtors. We keep a contact list of who we can refer business to, who do we know and who do we trust.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really important point, and we should also mention too that you are located in Tucson, but you're able to work with clients from really all over the U.S. because you're dealing predominantly with the feds. That's sort of my understanding?
Well, we deal with the feds and we deal with most states. There's only two states that we can't work with, and believe it or not, it's Oregon and Washington.
Ah, so if you're in the Pacific Northwest, find somebody else.
Well,
But
it's
if
the state taxes that we can't
yeah,
deal with because they
right.
require that you be licensed in the state as a CPA or attorney. But we work everywhere else: Hawaii, Guam, Alaska, New York, New Jersey, Florida. We handle state taxes wherever they have income tax and where they have sales. We deal with sales tax issues when needed as well. But as far as property, yeah, we refer out business and all across the country, and we help people all across the country.
I also wanted to I was curious. You'd mentioned that you're speaking to the IRS really daily, and obviously the IRS is a massive employer. There's, gosh, I don't know how many employees work at the IRS, but I should have looked that up ahead of time. But it's a substantial number, and I think the number is increasing, if I remember correctly, with the current administration. I think,
Almost
but
doubling.
yeah, doubling, right. So is it, I want to say 100,000 people maybe? I can't remember the number. But regardless,
Yeah.
you are dealing with a specific group there. How important is it to work with an attorney who does have relationships with some, like, do you deal a lot with the same people at the IRS over and over, or is there a reputation that gets built up between attorneys and IRS for, like, for easier, smoother transactions?
So technically, we can't legally say that we have special relationships with
Sure.
the IRS, but as you work with them, you gain a reputation.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that I have certain IRS agents on a blacklist that I might just hang up on them when I get them because they're horrible. But again, any professional relationship, you develop a reputation, and so I think we have a really good reputation. But especially when it comes to resolving cases, we know the local revenue officers, but we deal with people all across the country. The number one asset that we bring to the table is we know how to get things done quickly. We know how to force the IRS to move when they don't want to move because they can take years to move on some things, but we know how to maneuver through their bureaucracy. It is, you wouldn't believe, they just added about 3 layers to their bureaucracy in the last couple of years. And one of my associate attorneys was just in here complaining about how ridiculous it is. And when you're talking to the IRS, we try to skip the line and go about 3 to 4 layers deep into their bureaucracy. The average person calling the IRS, they get bad information, they get told the wrong thing all the time. And so when people are trying to help them out, again, one of the key things that I hear all the time is to qualify for a mortgage, you have to have your tax returns filed. The IRS will tell you have to go back and file 10 years of returns. Have you heard that?
Yes.
It's wrong.
Oh,
It's in their internal revenue manual, their regulations, that they can only go back 6 years. And the only reason to file a return older than 3 years is to lower a balance that's already been assessed. So you can't get a refund more than 3 years old, and falling more than 6 years, they can't even demand that you do it. So you're paying a CPA to do work that's unnecessary and cumulative.
Ah, that is interesting because I'd always heard that sort of 7 year number or whatever that number is. Certainly not. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. So, anyway, for anyone out there who has client with tax lien or any sort of tax situation that they are nervous about, that they have a debt that they owe to the government, this is a great time, to reach out to Hubert, because this is going to help get them on the right track back to home ownership and just out of their tax situation. So, Guardian Tax Law is the website, and Hubert and his team are specialists in tax strategy, especially related to the IRS. So reach out to him. He is looking for great realtors to refer business to as well. So please consider adding him to your professional network. We are very, very impressed with what Hubert. We just to pull back the curtain a little bit, we do get requests almost every week from different PR firms that are representing law firms. We almost always pass on those because they don't seem to always be a good fit for us. But we were really excited to speak with Hubert today, so please consider using him. He works with a lot of realtors, and he helps your clients. So reach out to him. Guardian Tax Law is where you go. Also, follow him on YouTube at Guardian Tax Law. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Hubert, I very much appreciate you coming on today and talking. We made tax liens fun, or at least more fun than they probably are in normal conversation. So I appreciate your candor, and I really appreciate you being so generous with this information. I know that not all attorneys are so forthcoming with sort of free information. So I really do appreciate that. I know our audience does as well. So on behalf of our audience, I want to thank Hubert for coming on our show. And we also on behalf of Hubert and myself, we want to thank the audience for getting to the end of this episode. I really want to encourage our audience to do two things that'll help out both Hubert and our show. Tell a friend. Think of one other realtor that could use this information. Maybe they have a client with a tax situation and it's becoming a stopper for them doing any sort of transaction. The perfect reason to reach out to Hubert and his firm. And also, please leave us a review. That would help us know what you like and what we can improve on the show, and also helps us get in front of more people. So tell a friend and leave a review. We very much would appreciate that. As always, again, Hubert, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And we will see everybody on the next episode. Thanks, Hubert.
Thank you, DJ. It's been my pleasure.